He kōna ipurangi tēnei nā 4 and 5 films mo te reorirangi o Aotearoa. The following episode contains strong language and some hearty auntie chats, so maybe don't listen if you've got tamariki around. Unprecedented times. It's a phrase you've probably heard a lot lately. I think of the climate crisis, a wealth gap that just keeps growing. And you might have heard we're now also in the middle of a pandemic. It's a lot, and it's in our faces all the time. It can be really overwhelming. That's how I was feeling when I started thinking about this season of He Kākano Ahau, exhausted and increasingly hopeless. But I don't want to feel hopeless. I want to stay invested, to keep fighting, to stay tūturu to the kaupapa. I've realised that what I need is room to dream and scheme again, about the world that I want for myself, my whānau and my mokopuna. What I need is hope. May we boundlessly dream of possibilities beyond our wildest imaginations.
I dream of a world where we can be our fluid selves.
May we weave communities of support, compassion and active solidarity.
I dream of a world where we can come together.
With our histories in front of us and our tupuna at our shoulders, may we walk into a future that is connected and thriving for all.
I dream of a world where Māori people have got our land back.
Where takatapui can be free.
Where Indigenous knowledge is recognised.
And as we heal Te Taonga, we naturally heal ourselves.
My name is Kahukutia and this is He Kākano Ahau, Season 2. Piki mai, kake mai. There's a very real grief that I feel sometimes when I think of all the things that were impacted by colonisation. The ways our land and our language were taken from us, the ways our knowledge and our tikanga were buried. I'm so grateful for the blood, sweat and tears of our kaumātua and pakeke, all the ways they've worked to ensure that what we do still have today is protected. Because it means that those of us who are mokopuna of the Māori Renaissance can put our energy into uplifting the knowledge that did survive, doing so in a way that makes sense for us today. One part of the revival that I find really interesting and so cool is taonga Puoro. We're spending this episode in Te Whanganui-a-Tara. I'm pretty stoked to be here. I've just left here and moved to Rotorua, and I've been really missing my city.
Kia ora! Oh, shia Puoro! Kia ora! Hara mai!
One of my favourite things about being here is our welly creative whānau. Today, we get to catch up with a few of them and have some pretty typical yarns.
I need a sexy Puoro ASMR account.
Oh my gosh.
I just want Māori ASMR. Gee, my OnlyFans.
Yeah, do it.
First up, let's meet Kali Materoa. She's a Hāti Ngāti from Reporua on the east coast, and she was lucky enough to grow up immersed in kōhanga reo in kura kaupapa with a good grounding in te ao Māori.
Yeah, I think colonisation is a B word. So it means that a lot of our kōrero have been mixed up or lost or misinterpreted or reinterpreted in a way that decenters our atua wāhine. There's no way that you can tell me a story like Pūtehui and how she swallowed the biggest storm and like not have her sit as a very integral part of that kōrero.
Kali's a taonga Puoro player, along with her bandmate Ruby Solly, who's here too. Ruby's giving big auntie vibes today with her outfit and big glasses.
I've got them on because I've got this fucking sty on my eye and it's massive and it looks like someone punched me in the face.
It doesn't look.
Nah, I probably won't, but only for trauma reasons. Like, I'm sure it works.
Ruby's kaitahu and a super talented poet and musician.
You can tell I'm the nerdy one in the copa. Straight away. It's like, Nazi nerd.
Nazi nerd.
Like, Kāti nerd, really.
Yeah, that's really how a lot of our hangs go. Half serious Māori revival and decol, and half hyena cackle cry laughing. And, you know, balance is important. But eventually I decide we probably should get to the kaupapa. I'm here to talk about taonga Puoro. If you haven't heard or seen taonga Puoro before, they're pretty much Māori instruments. They can be made from all sorts of materials, but traditionally things like wood, bone and stone.
And these instruments were seen not just as musical instruments, but as tools of kind of superstition.
They were really important for our people historically.
Because music was just integrated through all parts of life. So it would be used for ritual, would be used for healing, would be used for the passing down of pūrākau, which in fact can be a healing thing in itself, especially for things like mental distress.
Ruby knows this because she uses them in her mahi as a music therapist.
So we had things like, what's something I could show?
Ruby picks up the pūtangitangi. It's made of clay and sits comfortably in the palm of her hand.
The breathing that you have to do to play is very similar to that like really deep tangi that you do for funerals, or I often do like that little kid cry like it's that the dairy, like it's that.
I'm familiar.
Yeah. So that was to get that crying started and get that out. And since a lot of our Indigenous communication could be done in a non-verbal way, and these are kind of like a pre-deal in some ways, that would be a way to do that instead of looking at talk therapy, maybe for somebody who's not as up for talking as other people might be. In Te Ao Māori, I can think of a lot of really beautiful, very quiet people where that would work far better than being like, what's wrong? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to have a cry?
Ruby describes taonga Puoro as like another reo, but maybe one that's a bit more accessible if you can't find the words in English or te reo Māori.
And as tangata whaiora myself, like I know that when you're unwell, it's really hard to learn another language, even when it is your first language once removed in a way. And you feel a deep sense of mama and a deep sense of guilt at not being able to do it as easily as other people. But learning this is like learning another reo Māori, and that's something that people in that position can do that gives them that strength to move towards wellness.
I love that taonga Puoro can be more than just instruments. They are tools to our wairuatanga, our spirituality. It's also one of the reasons that they almost disappeared entirely.
Taonga Puoro were banned as part of the Tohunga Suppression Act.
The 1907 Tohunga Suppression Act was one of the many ways that cultural erasure was actively written into our law. The bill made illegal a lot of our traditional healing practices, as well as the tools of that practice. The way Ruby puts it, the original intentions of the bill weren't entirely bad.
One of the purposes was actually to protect Māori from people who were saying that they were tohunga, who weren't actually tohunga, and that was putting some people in danger, especially with modern illnesses that were coming to New Zealand at that time from Pākehā and Tawaiui immigrants.
But they were still mostly, pretty bad.
It really was to suppress our culture and all the visible parts that were kind of above water.
Ruby's talking about Edward T. Hall's cultural iceberg model, which suggests that about 10% of a culture is above water, is visible. That's things like what we wear, the songs we sing, the language we speak. Most of the culture, though, sits under the surface, underwater, and it's less visible to outsiders. For us, that's things like how we relate to each other or to the whenua.
So all the stuff that was really obvious, they could get rid of through this one act, really.
Let's leave Newtown now and head over to the leafy heights of Karori. I'm off to find Ariana Tikau. She's a singer, composer and super brainy knowledge holder from Kaitahu as well. As if that wasn't enough, she's also a 2020 Arts Laureate who's been working in the music space for a really long time. I've come to see Ariana because I know that at some point we got a lot of our knowledge about Puoro back, and I think she might be the person who can tell me about it. So here's what we know. In the mid-80s, there was a series of hui to recall any information related to taonga Puoro. There were a lot of people there, but some of the names you might be familiar with are Nai Tūhoi musician and composer Hirini Melbourne, teacher and jazz musician Richard Nuns, and Nelson carver and instrument maker Brian Flintoff. This group called themselves Haumanu. It was a name chosen by Brian to mean the breath of the birds. But when he shared the name with the rest of the group,
Hirini just kind of smiled, and because he knew that there was this other meaning behind it as well.
Haumanu also means revival. So after one of those hui, this passionate group, Haumanu, set off on a journey with support from kaumātua across the country.
Yeah, they would get together in wānanga and go out to marae and go and talk to elders or kaumātua at the time, and they would gather up stories. So it was a really kind of flax roots based movement, I guess, and each little kōrero became kind of a thread that brought this whāriki back. So at that point, when they were going out and collecting all these stories, was there pretty much nothing known about Puoro? I mean, not really in the mainstream. So yeah, there was only little snippets and whānau, memories of sound, but also sometimes it might have been, somebody had heard about the sound of an instrument, or it wasn't an intact tradition, I suppose, at that time.
That's how we get musicians like Ariana, Ruby and Carly today, because of those first adventurers who travelled the country, heading to as many marae as they could, painstakingly piecing together all these little scraps of information, memories and unearthed taonga from dusty cupboards.
It's a pretty remarkable story, really, and I find it quite interesting that it was both Pākehā and Māori involved. We have these allies that have supported the taonga to come back, and so that's because of them, dedicating decades of their lives that we are in the position that we're in now.
These days, Ariana, Ruby and Carly all perform together, along with a fourth member, Te Kahurere Moa Taumata, in an all-wāhine taonga Puoro collective called Maianginui. It's really significant that they are all wāhine, because wāhine have always been part of the world of taonga Puoro, but I think that's something that history's forgotten.
One of the effects of colonisation, I think, has been the restructuring of our society in terms of the role of wāhine, and some people kind of have a misconception that women don't play. I've had some people having issues with me playing pūkākau and stuff like that, and I think that's because of the English translation of war trumpet. Even in our traditions, wāhine were warriors anyway and fought, so there's a lot of working through and undoing of those misconceptions that are put in our way, especially for wāhine Māori. And so, we're trying to regain a balance now so that wāhine can see ourselves in this space. And so, there's a good emphasis on making sure that wāhine know that this is a space that we were involved in traditionally, but also are definitely involved in now. Rather than taking away from the tāne and the movement of taonga Puoro, that the wāhine coming forward now are kind of coming up to just take our natural place alongside them.
Back to Newtown now, where Carly and Ruby have laid a table in front of us with a whole bunch of taonga. I'm feeling like a kid in a candy store looking at all of these beautiful instruments. Some of them are super beautifully carved in wood and bone. Some are colourful and bound with string and feathers. Some are actually really simple. A couple river stones, long thin bones and sticks, a simple wooden tube. Most of these are really familiar to Carly. Taonga Puoro have been part of her life since high school.
Instead of like a lunch bell, we had a pūtātara.
Carly went to St. Joseph's Māori Girls' School in the Hawke's Bay. That's one of a number of kura that deliver education under the kaupapa known as Te Aho Matua.
That was how you knew you were the cool kid if you could go and play the pūtātara, because not everybody could get a real good voice on it, and I was good at it, so I loved it.
And Ruby Solly played ko'auau in primary school. I think it's amazing that in the space of about 30 years, these taonga have gone from being half buried and just remembered to being placed in the hands of tamariki all over Aotearoa. I asked Carly and Ruby if they'd show me a couple of their taonga.
This one's a pūmotomoto, which is the same name for the whantanao. This one's actually especially cool for you because it's from a tūhui, kōrero. About I love it when people do iwi shout-outs. It's one of my favourite things, little iwi shout-out. And so that kōrero is that this was played into the pūmotomoto, the whantanao, but it was also played over the mother when she was pregnant as well. And so it's a very subtle instrument for that reason. Like you wouldn't want to be playing drum and bass to a newborn baby. But and then once the baby was born, since they've been used to hearing it in utero, they'd kind of calm down when they heard that instrument. Ko ine ka tamariki o Heniputi Hue. So this is my tiny little baby one. This is a ko'auau pongaihu. So these kind of invoke the song of peace that was pushed out of Heniputi Hue or the Hue after the big battle. So they've got like a really soft, sweet song that people have to really kind of tune in to hear, which in itself helps people to calm down and be peaceful.
I know Carly has a lot of the pūrākau that relate to taonga Puoro.
Should I get my pūtorino?
Yeah. She agrees to share one with us.
So this is my version of the story of Raukatauri. So it's got all of my 11 herbs and spices.
Your secret recipe.
Disclaimer. I imagine Raukatauri at the beginning, I te orokohanga o te ao. When Rangi and Papa first split. Tāne took his daughter Raukatauri to the heart of the ngahere, to the forest, where she could be safe and rest. But she was the first of the living creatures to live in the ngahere that was not tethered to Papa. And so she'd use the winds and fly up above the tree canopies and keep all of the tōtara and kauri entertained. Until one night when the big storm hit. and she wrapped herself amongst the pūriri trees and stayed there until the storm passed. From her wings came the whare ahuru, her pūtorino. And as she lived in this whare ahuru, she would often crawl to the top at the waha of her whare, gazing at Hina and sing away. And Hina would sing back to her with twinkling light, and that would go back and forth between them throughout the phases. That song that Raukatauri would sing to Hina was one night heard on the winds by Pepepe. And so Pepepe followed this sound all the way back to Raukatauri's whare ahuru. And he would sing back to her, and so they fell in love, I suppose is the way to put it. Raukatauri invited Pepepe into her whare ahuru, but to sustain Raukatauri and her new uri, it was understood that Pepepe was to sacrifice himself, a tinana, to nourish his new whānau. And so when Raukatauri's uri were strong enough to move out into the world, they ate a little waharoa for them to crawl out of and onto the forest floor. And Raukatauri sat at this new waha and would sing to her tamariki, so they would remember to sing to Pepepe, so they would remember to sing to Hina. Nā reira, ka puta ko te pūtorino.
In this episode, you might have noticed some pretty special music. It's actually from Ruby's album, Pōneke. She calls it a love letter to our city, and in the album, Ruby's playing both taonga Puoro and cello, which she's classically trained in.
Like, I remember being a little Māori girl in orchestras playing cello, and there's all these great photos of just like all of these Pākehā children, and then there's this like one kid whose hair is like like this big scruffy head of hair holding this little rental cello. And I kind of like, it's like Edward Scissorhands when you see like the scene, and it's all of these like beautiful pastel people, and then there's Edward, like, and I look like Edward. I loved the music and I loved being there, but I remember that being such a hard space. But there were always things I always kind of have to kind of shave off the sides of myself to fit.
So Pōneke is really Ruby owning that classical music space for herself, flipping it into something that makes sense within a te ao Māori context.
Because if you think about it, these are the original classical instruments of Aotearoa. This is the original classical music of Aotearoa. The original folk music of Aotearoa is Māori music. We often don't get to hold those spaces. We often we're manuhiri in our own spaces. But then to like hold that space until we're kind of ahika within classical music and within jazz, not just for us, but for the people who kept these instruments alive and for the people who will benefit from that after us. So I was going out into places around Pōneke and playing taonga pūrākau, responding to those spaces and recording that. And then I'd go home and layer up cello to go with that. But the cello would have to match the taonga pūrākau. It was never the other way around, which is often how it is in classical composition at the moment. And then also looking at pūrākau responding to the environment, so putting the environment at the top of the process. I've always had kind of understanding that music can come directly from the environment, and that's something that's always been a big part of my life.
I know it can be quite intimidating to pick up these taonga, and colonising whakaaro would have us think that we're not even worthy of doing it in the first place. But where would our tipuna be if they hadn't jumped on the waka and come to find Aotearoa? Sometimes you've just got to dive in and give things a go.
So this one's probably is a really nice one to learn on because it's quite dense. So you cover with your fingers like that and then block off one nostril and have that. And you kind of angle until you hit the point where it will sound. So it's kind of all about slow. It's quite a slow learning process. Sometimes you give them to people and they're very like, where'd it go?
Oh,
everybody knows.
Yeah. Everybody has a different shape pongaihu.
That's something that I love about working with these in a therapeutic way. Like one of the kind of things I've kind of found for when you're teaching someone to play is you just kind of like ghost play underneath them to like pull them up.
You're really good at that, yeah.
That's that person's oro, and then you can kind of wrap yours around them to kind of help them extend it out and give them the space to express and improvise and catch their breath.
I'm just really getting that heart out, like protected by your auntie's vibe right now.
Honestly, I was pretty nervous to come in today, but I'm sitting there and I'm feeling so protected and cared for and held. And as Carly puts it, you don't need flash taonga either.
I think there's a misconception that you need this beautiful carved something for it to be puoro, but some of my favourite are like, he anga from the moana, or a stone or a piece of driftwood. Like those are some of my most favourite puoro because they're everywhere. Go to Tātahi and, Tangaroa will hook you up if you ask. It's where I found most of my ko'auau, just bone pieces that you can then shape sand with a stone and ta-da, you have a puoro. Yeah, just kind of trying to demystify some of the weird things that people think about our traditions and our practices and rituals.
Another misconception about puoro is that they can only be used for mystical, spooky, mysterious reasons. It's actually okay to have fun with it.
All puoro stories can be super sexy. So like, you can sexify them.
Yeah,
but
there's something about making eye contact while playing it.
Holy, I don't. I keep my eyes closed.
Yes, sexy puoro. Ariana told me about this.
They were used traditionally for kind of seduction and stuff as well, improving your worth maybe as a potential lover or whatever.
Just like with other revivals, with taonga Puoro there can be this tendency to be quite precious about the knowledge that we do have. That's entirely valid, that makes a lot of sense. This was almost lost, and of course we want to hold tight to it all. But I think it's also important that if a cultural practice is going to thrive, there's space for experimentation and growth.
Our tupuna were always experimenting.
Ruby's got an example to show me.
So this is a double-hulled pūtoreno, and we have like a couple of museum examples of this. And now because we have that one or two historical examples, we have them as part of our instruments. But that would have just been a couple of people experimenting.
And as Ariana says, it's so important to know the whole story so we can understand what is growth and what is new.
Yeah, it's important to know, what is from the tradition and what is innovation. We've got this one here, which is a ku.
Ariana's ku looks a little bit like a bow and arrow. There are traditional ku out there, but this is not one of them.
But it's got a guitar string on it. So, obviously we didn't have guitar strings back in the day. But, it just makes it a lot louder to play because otherwise, ku are a very personal sort of quiet instrument.
So cool.
With the metal string, I find that the kihi in summer can sound quite metallic, so I kind of like to see that as being an innovation, but it also has kind of a resonance with our natural world as well that can sound in that similar way.
This is so exciting, seeing these wāhine play Puoro, reconnecting our people, finding new ways to articulate connection and belonging. It feels like I can see the potential of what Te Ao Māori could grow to be. Taonga Puoro was a tradition that might have disappeared entirely, but with seeds planted by our kaumātua and cared for by players today, maybe one day we will have this glorious ecosystem of Puoro players once again.
One of my hopes for the future of taonga Puoro is that it just becomes normal in whānau, on the marae as well, within pōwhiri or at tangi, just wherever we gather, that it's just a part of our everyday again. So, and I'm kind of hopeful that that's going to happen in the not too distant future.
I'm left thinking about all of the revivalists who really made this dream a reality today. The ones who kept the practice quietly alive, the ones who fought to bring it back, and the likes of these wāhine today. The revival we're experiencing did not occur by accident, but because of their dreams and ambitions. Like Ariana, I'm wondering what the future can hold for taonga Puoro. If taonga Puoro is another language that we have to speak, I'm thinking about all the kōrero that there is still to have. Coming up in the next episode of He Kākano Ahau, we're going to meet a few super cool artists working to reclaim and revitalise the knowledge of our tipuna, and doing it in cool new ways.
That show was not about me. That show was not for me. That show was for Indigenous queer people.
It's super empowering and funny and sexy and
Hot as.
We're going to leave you now with a poem by Wellington poet Azembri Aulani, written especially for this episode of He Kākano Ahau.
My bones shift my breath to parts that need it. I breathe in, filling the space that sits protected on Mama's lap under Papa Tuanuku's chest. I breathe out, pulling Papa's fishing line, playing tug of war with Tangaroa. I wet my mouth to the edges of Hine Raukataudi's cocoon. I swallow, the war calmed, dried by Hine Pū te Hui. My bones moor this body, an anchor tied at a western harbour. Yet I notice the stagnant wood, loose teeth, misshapen stones, sheltering near my spine. And I wonder what it would sound like if my breath carried through it all.
He Kākano Ahau was hosted, produced and co-written by me, Kahukutia. Melody Thomas is the other co-writer and producer for the series. She also edited with the help of Kirsten Johnstone. Big mihi to our production assistants, Tahira Maianginui, Briar Pōmana, India Logan Riley, Rebecca Parangi. Our accounts manager is Alison Pearce. Our reo advisor is Jamie Te Cowell. Mark Chesterman is the series engineer, and Ursula Grace and Francis Morton are the executive producers. Music for the series created by Ruby Soli, Ma and Ranui Mars, and our cover art is by Huriana Kopeke Te Aho. So many thank yous to our poets and creatives, Ranui Mars, Azembri Aulani, Marati K, Taranaki Young Grace, Trinity Thompson Brown and Sinead Overby. Big mihi to the folks at RNZ, Megan Whelan, Shannon Honui Thompson, Justine Murray and Tim Burnell. This podcast was made with the support of RNZ and New Zealand On Air. The final big thank you is to all of our kai kōrero who shared their thoughts, hopes and dreams for this season of He Kākano Ahau. We are so grateful. This kaupapa is for generations of Indigenous babies to come. May you be grounded, may you be hopeful, may you always be able to find your way home. Aroha nui.